thanks. Just as you're talking, I'm just thinking, that's another chapter in our life. The fact that we, got married and had our worlds, and then all of a sudden we get this gig opportunity to play in Gary Sinise's band, which came out of, out of Disney, really, because
because of Disney. Yeah,
he was
the Candlelight Christmas show, which is this giant show in front of the American Adventure, 500-piece choir, 65-piece orchestra, Voices of Liberty, massive fanfare trumpets, and a guest celebrity narrator, and from like Walter Cronkite to Felicia Rashad to you name it, famous people. And so Gary Sinise was doing it, and he did it in 2001 and 2, and we kind of waved behind stage. We didn't know him, and I think we met him for the first time maybe in 2002.
Yeah.
And then in 2003, we met him finally backstage. And Danny and I were on both sides of the stage, and we would kind of, look at each other and
so he kind of knew there was a connection with us.
He asked, he goes, "Are you guys married?" Because he would watch us, because up there between, he would narrate and then we'd play a song.
It was a benefit for wounded soldiers, and Gary gave us a lecture and said, "You're going to see people in such bad shape with no faces and everything, missing limbs. Go talk to them." And you brought your friend Sharon, and sat with a guy that had lost both legs and just had replacements, had prosthetics. Before the end of this night, Sharon had him up on stage with a tambourine. It was wow. This amazing, holy moly! It was something else to see the power of just playing music for people could be. And then it ended up being 16 years later. We're
17.
17. Yeah. We're in this band, and
it's the most important thing we've ever done.
Greetings, I'm Mark Riley, and welcome to the Washington Tattoo Podcast, where the world's musical traditions come to life. The Washington Tattoo is an international music and arts festival coming to the Washington, D.C. metro area. Our podcast explores the lives and stories of world-renowned musicians, dancers, producers, choreographers, artists, educators, arts advocates, and those who serve our cultural communities at large. For more information and donations, find us at www.thewashingtontattoo.com. Now please enjoy this episode of the Washington Tattoo Podcast, sharing the power of the arts, one story at a time.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Washington Tattoo Podcast. You are all in for an incredible treat today to hear the stories of Danny and Beth Gottlieb, inspirational human beings, and please dig deeper into what their story holds after the podcast is over. Two incredible human beings and amazing percussionists. Danny Gottlieb is a well-known American drummer. He is best known as a founding member of the Pat Metheny Group and co-founder of the group Elements with Mark Egan. He is currently a professor at the University of North Florida, teaching the evolution of jazz, and is the author of The Evolution of Jazz Drumming through Hudson Music and Hal Leonard. He is featured on over 400 recordings, including 4 Grammy Award winners. Beth Gottlieb is an internationally recognized percussionist, soloist, teacher, and clinician. She is currently the principal percussionist with the Walt Disney World Candlelight Orchestra at Epcot and percussionist and drum circle coordinator for Victor Wooten's Wooten Woods. Her music is featured in multiple major Disney animated films and an impressive collection of major recording artists. Beth is a former member of Future Corps, Future World Brass, and World Dancers Band. Danny and Beth, known as the Gottlieb Duo, perform in concerts and clinics around the world. The duo are active musicians in the Lieutenant Dan Band. The Lieutenant Dan Band is named after the infamous character Lieutenant Dan in the motion picture Forrest Gump, portrayed by lead singer Gary Sinise. Gary Sinise, the proud founder of the Gary Sinise Foundation, serves our nation by honoring our defenders, veterans, first responders, their families, and those in need. The foundation does this by creating and supporting programs that are designed to entertain, educate, and strengthen communities. The well-known Invincible Spirit Festival is one of the many highlights that bring together every part of military communities. These festivals celebrate the heroic spirit displayed by our wounded service members, as well as the courage of not only our heroes, but their families and caregivers as well. So folks, this is a super exciting episode. You're going to get a lot out of it. The amazing work that Danny and Beth have done throughout their careers and currently with the Gary Sinise Foundation's Lieutenant Dan Band is absolutely amazing. So folks, without further ado, please enjoy. Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Washington Tattoo Podcast. And we have the incredible Beth and Danny Gottlieb on the other line here. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to chat tonight.
Our pleasure.
Our pleasure.
Yeah.
So we've been friends for a while. It goes back quite a ways, and we've done gigs together. I was actually a student in a workshop that you guys had put together down in Northwestern State University, Louisiana, with Ken Green, and I heard there's a great story about that. But honestly, I'd love to just get everyone familiar with you guys and your story. And I mean, just from the very beginning. Could you guys just share where you got your start? I mean, where did you all, Beth, if you start with you, where did you get your start and where are you from and all that good stuff?
Well, my dad grew up in Nashville and then got drafted. He went to Vanderbilt and was in the Korean War. And so we kind of moved a lot when he married my mom, met her at an Army base in Utah. And so we lived in Erie, Pennsylvania, 3 places in New York, Syracuse, Albany, Schenectady, and then moved to South Florida. And I played what they call girl instruments. I played the clarinet, violin, and piano. And I always wanted to be a percussionist. My dad was like, girls don't play drums. And so I knew how to read music. And we had moved from South Florida to Huntsville, Alabama, because my dad was working some with a military base there. And finally, he let me start percussion in the 7th grade. But I was already 2 years late. They'd started in 5th grade, and it was all boys. And I went in, and I was so eager for it. And the boys were just goofballs. I had 2 sons. I know what boys are like at that age. And so I was very serious, and I just took to it to fish to water. I went to a great high school, Grissom High School, very competitive marching band, jazz band, wind ensemble, and just fell in love. And somebody's in the doorbell, so I'll let Danny keep going.
Okay, there. The dog is running up. Okay, yeah. Well, Beth, I can tell you more of Beth's story, but I'll let her continue. But why don't I'll tell you a little bit about my story. I got to the drums also pretty late. I grew up in Union, New Jersey. I was actually born in New York City, but grew up in New Jersey. My mom played violin, and she was a social worker by trade, but played violin in a community orchestra in New Jersey Symphony. And I went to go get a violin in 4th grade. They didn't have any. I played cello, and I loved the cello, and I could fake it really well, but I was awful. But there was a drummer in middle school band who he had all the girls, but the drums were very, very cool. And I was always attracted to drums, and my parents were totally frustrated because I would never practice the cello. I wanted to go out and play sports and didn't want to hang in the house. But the drums, I found the drums and overnight just kind of took to it. I asked my parents if I could take drum lessons. I went to a summer music thing in 7th grade run by Mr. Geist, my first music teacher, who I ended up staying friends with forever and ever, and ended up switching from the cello to the drums. And then in my 2nd year, this is age 15 of playing the drums, discovered that Joe Morello was teaching 5 minutes from where I was living. Wow. So I'll continue that later. Let's go back to Beth.
Oh, I think one of the reasons why we're successful percussionists is we played other instruments first. And so we're not just drummers. We kind of understand music, As far as Danny goes, everybody loves him. He's a musician's drummer because he was a cellist. So, I went to Grissom, and I really didn't take private lessons. I did a whole bunch of stuff. And, but I was really into the drum line. When I was a freshman, I made the snare line with 5 seniors. So I was this little skinny kid wearing braces, and it was, it made me tough.
Yeah.
And a guy named Al Murray came in that year and taught the drum line, who went on to do Blue Devils and all kinds of stuff. And he was in that famous Anaheim Kingsmen drum line. And then the next year, Tom Float came into Grissom. And so, and I remember Tom I was 16 going to my parents saying, I want her in Spirit of Atlanta. And my parents are like, no way. You're not going off in the summer. They finally let me after my freshman year in college, but they wouldn't let me go do drum corps. So I did Spirit then when I was 18. But I was very lucky to have those guys show me, and just a very motivated band. And but I wasn't going to go into music. I was going to go to Vanderbilt and go into pre-med. And I went to All-State Band in Alabama my senior year, and the teacher there, Larry Mathis, offered me literally free ride plus money to go to college. So I ended up going to Alabama for my undergrad. Didn't even know there was 3 minor scales. I never had music lessons really, and just went from there. So that's kind of how I got started. It was kind of by accident. It was just fun. I love percussion. I wanted to play percussion because I'm very type A. I didn't want to just play one instrument. I love watching the people run around and play everything. So I've always been a percussion. Yeah, percussionist. Hey. When people ask what we do, around here, we're getting friends that aren't musicians. I always say, well, he sits and bangs on things, and I stand and bang on things.
That's percussion. What do you
what
do
is that?
I love it.
It's like that picture that shows like 20 different instruments. It says people think this is a bongo. That's a bongo. That's a bongo. That's a bongo. And it shows a bongo. They say conga. Whatever.
You're right.
So you did Joe Morello.
Yeah. So I just got so lucky. I don't know why things just happened, but I could play when I picked up a stick and I had a touch to it. And I think what Beth said is really true. There's something about if you're a string player or play another instrument. Many of my bass player friends started on trumpet. It's kind of an uncanny thing. Joe Morello was a violin player and a very good one. He played
didn't know that.
Mendelssohn Violin Concerto when he was 12. And Heifetz went to hear him like with a youth orchestra in Boston. And, Sonny Boy, picked up the violin and played the first 8 measures. And Joe said it flipped him out that he said, I know I can't ever do it. I mean, it was just, it might have been more, I don't know how dramatic it was, but I was a cello player. I played through high school too, but I could just play the drums. And then discovering Joe Morello down the block, I vaguely knew who he was. I knew some jazz music through Mr. Geist, but here was Joe on the cover of the Ludwig drum catalog, and he's teaching up there in that studio there. Is that okay? Yeah. So I went up and he said, yes, I'll give you an evaluation lesson. And I took a lesson with him, and I started going every week, and he, unbeknownst to me, how heavy what I was being shown, not besides his, prowess and fame from playing with Dave Brubeck, but he studied with George Lawrence Stone and Billy Gladstone. And George Lawrence Stone had this specific way with the level system. Yep. And I was being shown, and, it took a minute to kind of figure it out. He was very, why are you, everything had to have a reason. Why are you holding the stick like this? I don't know. Okay, well here, so he had a thing. And through Joe, I got to meet Mel Lewis also when I was in high school. I went to see Mel at the Vanguard. I asked him if he'd give me a lesson. I said, I'm studying with Joe. He said, I'm too busy. I went to a lesson with Joe the next week, and Mel said, he's too busy. Call the union, get his number. Let's get him on the phone. And from Dorn and Kirshner, the music store where Joe was teaching, we called Mel Lewis. And I said, it's Danny. I just met you last week. Joe Morello would like to speak with you. What do you mean you're too busy? Give this kid a lesson. He loves your cymbals. And Mel went, okay. Then I started hanging with Joe and Mel would take me on recording sessions. And I got really lucky to have both of them. Went to University of Miami, got lucky again. It was not expensive at that point, only 50 jazz majors. I got to play in the top band as a freshman in the big band. And lo and behold, second year, Pat Metheny comes in as a student. We hit it off. We played together. We were in a faculty ensemble. Pat leaves to go teach in Boston. I finished school. My first gig is playing with Bobby Rydell, singer from the 50s, because I was playing shows on Miami Beach. I got to go to Australia. Bobby was a drummer who only didn't carry a piano player, only carried a drummer. That started it, and ended up moving to New York, then in the Metheny Group in Boston, and then a career ensued after that.
Wow. That's incredible. I didn't actually know that you and Pat Metheny were actually classmates.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
I knew that you had gone to school together, but I didn't realize you were in the same grade together. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah, and he was very, like a band leader right the day I met him. Let's play. Now, why are you doing that in the cymbal? Come on, try this. Let's play like this. Okay, whatever you want. Let's go.
That's incredible.
And then he went to teach in Boston and subsequently leading to playing with Gary Burton. And then he got me on that gig when Bob Moses left, and then the band started.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember being at PASIC, and I think it may have been like 2000 or maybe 1998. And Gary Burton and Mikado Ozone had done their duet together, and they blew the doors off the place. And that was one of the discussions. Someone asked something about Pat Metheny in the crowd, and he's like, "Yeah, this kid showed up and he knew everything I played. And he came and just copied literally every lick."
And he was obsessed with. We used to play Gary Burton tunes even again before he was in the band. But that was a funny thing when Beth and I ultimately got together. All of the people we either knew or played with or we had so much in common. Beth had known Gary also through her world, and
right,
fun connection.
That's amazing. I mean, from where you all got your start, and honestly, all the different people that you've connected with, I mean, there's tons of inspiration there. I mean, so putting that together as a youngster, I mean, you don't really recognize, I think, the massive connections you're making at that point. Would you say it was probably in your mid 20s or early 30s, like that all those pieces started kind of making sense? Or I mean, when did that all start to kind of hit you all that you were a part of this incredible scene?
It hasn't yet.
Kind of came
We're
and
still
went.
No, it's still, you never think that. It's just, you're always learning.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we still practice even during the pandemic. You practice, you work on stuff, write books, you do all. You're always working to get better.
You know, it was something, I think, for both of us. You know, we were lucky enough to be with people that were better than us early on, that kind of brought us up into another level. And you know, then we were part of our respective scenes. You know, you working and playing a million shows and me traveling. And,
my thing with Disney is crazy. Talking about how it happened is. My senior year in college, the band director at Alabama called me in and said, "There's this place called Epcot, and they're having this 450-piece all-American marching band to open it. You want to go to Disney for a week?" We're like, yeah. So went down there, and I was with 3 of us from Alabama. And when I got there was this like 75-piece drum line, and I had just come off of Spirit, and they're like, "Oh, you have drum corps experience. Can you run this?" And I'm a female, and there's 75 of us from all different styles. And they put us on the rooftop at Communicore, and we opened Epcot. It was amazing. And then that following summer, I did the All-American College Band and ended up getting hired by Future Corps and going to Disney. And I'd started my master's at Eastman and left, you know, finished that later on down on the road.
Yeah.
But when I got to Disney, I was a kid. I was 22 and playing with amazing people that were better than me. Again, people from Count Basie's band, Woody Herman's band. And I remember speaking of Lionel Hampton and Gary Burton, those guys. One day I was with Future Corps. We were getting ready for a set, warming up on the vibes. Lionel Hampton walked up, and I was using his mallets. I'm like, ah! You know, and so the Disney thing really, that was learning. I mean, you know, college and taking lessons and all that was great, but there's nothing to be said than playing professionally.
Yeah. So, I mean, let me ask that question right there. So coming off a drum corps, was there any doubt in your mind of doing that? I mean, being a female and going and being asked to lead, was there a hesitation at all? Or were you like, no, I'm just doing this?
No, because I was captain of Alabama and I was kind of used to it, you know, and it was interesting because my his father died when he was a little boy, and he had 2 daughters, and he raised us to be very strong women because, my mom says maybe he went too far, but my sister's a very high level executive, and she went to Vanderbilt in 3 years with 2 degrees. So, you know, he, you know, like before he learned how to drive a car, he made us learn how to change a tire. He taught us like the military, you're going to be responsible. You're going to be organized, you're going to learn how to save money, you're going to be healthy, you're going to exercise. And, you know, he unfortunately passed recently, but he was a wonderful motivator, even though he didn't play music, but just life. And so he, you know, I got to say, he taught me to be a very strong woman, not to have to depend on a guy, or, you know, even though it's nice. But, you know, just it's being a female in the music business is tough. You know, you have to have a lot of balls.
Well, I appreciate that so much, because I mean, my wife and I, when we met, she refused to let me hold the door open for her. She's like, I'm an independent woman, and she's very type A. And it's, but I think that's one of those beautiful things where when you connect with those folks and you see how that really starts to layer and you help each other out, it's what's the old adage where they say when the tide rises, all the boats are lifting at the same time. So, I mean, all the boats rise if we're all working together. And I am blown away with this connection with Disney as well, because I think that's really how we started to kind of put things together. I was a senior at Northwestern State. I had seen a clinic and masterclass that you had all had done, and we ended up doing a piece together. I honestly don't remember what it was because it was so many years ago now. but a handful of years later, we had met through Bill Sweeney, who was at the Fife and Drum Corps at Epcot. Yeah. And he's like, hey, just letting you know that, you know, Danny and Beth are going to be up in your neck of the woods in DC with Gary Sinise. And it was just, the worlds just all started kind of colliding at that point. And I feel like, I mean, at that breadbasket point at Epcot, you probably met a ton of musicians that were all really starting their careers. And I can only imagine what the network was like there.
Right. And it's still, and just a great place, you know, so many, especially back in the heyday of entertainment, there was 400 full-time musicians,
right?
You know, all the parks and just amazing times and all different types of music and that I got to do. And then Danny too. I mean, he played the shows and, we, even though we don't live there anymore, we live in Franklin or Nashville. We still go back and play there, you know, and the recordings back then, I remember, one of the things, you know, that I was very glad at Alabama to be in the jazz band under Steve Sample, because he would throw these vibe parts at me and go 1, 2, 1, you know, and I had to learn to read fast, you know, because in typical percussion lessons, they always say, okay, take it slow until you can work it up. Well, that's not the real world at all. And I remember one of the first times I was doing a Disney recording session was Little Mermaid, and it was da 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 on, like, play it. You know, I didn't know it was a major movie. It was a recording session. And and when I do clinics, sometimes I love taking in something as simple as It's a Small World or, you know, Mickey Mouse March or something and say, okay, here you go. The light's on. 1, 2, ready. And watch people totally choke.
Well, I have to say, you are my daughter's hero, by the way. She is all about Ariel right now. And you're like, I know the person who played that.
Well, even last week, I got to do a recording session here in Nashville for some Disney fireworks show. And you don't get the music ahead of time. I walk in and there's this Glock part. I'm like, okay, here we go. And then the rest was like cymbals, bass drum, timpani, some of that. That wasn't hard. But they're like, let's start with a Glock. Put the headphones on, look at it. 1, 2, ready, go.
There you go.
And you just play it, and that takes, you know, a lot of confidence, and you know, he's been doing a lot of recording too. You know, where you just have to go in and sight read it.
Yeah. I mean, go
ahead. What were you gonna say?
No, Danny, please, if you could chat just about your experience also from the recording side of the house and your experience.
Oh, sure. Well, you know, I was just going to say one thing. You know, some of the recordings here in Nashville. As Millie the dog is barking. You know, I when they give us the music ahead of time, to me it makes sense. Give us a chance to figure out what we're going to do. And some of the sessions they do, and some of the sessions they don't. And I'm also finding that some of the composers who are non-drummers are giving you a printout of what they played on a machine.
Oh, right.
And some of the things they play on a machine are either impossible or not in my wheelhouse of what I would do.
Right.
So I sit home if I get lucky enough and get it ahead of time, and I have to sit there and go, okay, I got to do that. And I have to, you know, it takes an hour to figure it out. And then I go there and I do an okay job. And then they say, well, just play whatever you want. Let's do another take. And then you don't even have to do it. So there's that. Then the ones that give you, you know, a score where they're showing you what's really happening and what you can play to and let you improvise. The best ones are when they say, just do what you want. And, you know, sometimes you get lucky and get to do a session where they just allow you to be you, and it's really fun.
I do the video game
story. Yeah. Which one?
Apex, the Legends. Yeah.
Well, there was which aspect? Well, there was one Apex Legends where it was a bassy chart for a big band, and they really let me do whatever I wanted. The guy loved it. There was like, you know, no fills written. He said, just go. So I took it out, and he said, great.
But
so
how many people listened to it?
That whole, okay. So we finished this thing, Apex Legends video game, which my students tell me they're all over it. The guy said, okay, just want to let you know, it's a free download, and then there's in-app purchases, and it gets an average of 75 million downloads a week.
Oh,
So I said, you mean,
What?
so I said, so wait a minute. So this thing we just did, that you played xylophone
yeah.
on it. I said, so more people are going to hear this in 1 week than everything we've done in our life combined. And everybody in this room has done in their life combined. He said, yeah, that's kind of the reality of it.
Unbelievable.
So, I don't know if they'll ever know, anybody will ever know.
Nobody will know
us,
it's us, but
it's been fun. And it's been a fulfilling life. Back to an earlier question you asked about, my goal was just, keep playing, get better, get study. I love to study. I was a study guy. I still am. I've been working on books, basically to hang out and study with drummers. One I did recently with the great drummer Harold Jones, who played with Basie, who I met in 1968. He's the last one of Mel Lewis, Joe Morello, and Harold Jones still alive. And we just did a book where I got to analyze 76 Basie charts, and we did it together. And I went out to his house, and I had him listen to music he played 40 years ago. By the way, I just heard Harold, a little clip. There's a thing on 60 Minutes right now with Tony Bennett's last concert at.
Harold was Tony's drummer.
Harold was Tony's drummer in the last 15 years. Sounds amazing. But here, so one funny thing, we're at Rollins one day, and when we first got to.
Yeah, I said, who's your favorite drummer? Like when we first were dating.
Yeah, and I said, well, somebody you probably never heard of. His name is Harold Jones. And
I said, that's my favorite drummer because he played with Natalie Cole for the Unforgettable, and I got to play Vibes on that tour like 3 times in Florida. And and I would sit there with Harold and go, he was the most amazing big band
he's
drummer.
Such a musical drummer, like really kind of like Buddy and Mel and everybody else you've ever heard together. That's how I kind of.
And then another funny story is this book he's working on now with Terry Gibbs.
Yep,
this is really funny.
It's a whole other story with this, but I'm working on Mel Lewis's drumming from the Terry Gibbs Dream Band. And I got to meet Terry through his son, Jerry Gibbs, who's an amazing writer and drummer. He's got a hit record out, or his CD out right now. But anyway, so I mentioned it to Beth. I'm going to start working on this thing, and then.
So when I was in the Disney All-American Band, they would bring in guest artists every week, and we would do big band concerts. One of them was Terry Gibbs, and there was 3 drummers in the band, and I said, "Oh, yeah, play Vibes." So Terry in rehearsal said, "Hey, do you want to come play a duet with me on the concert? We'll just share the vibes." So we were on there playing blues in the concert, and we were playing, he reached over me, so I reached over him. So then we started just screwing around, and it was really funny and it was fun. Turns out the head talent booker was in the audience, and the next week he offered me the job of Future Corps.
Oh, wow.
So by playing with Terry Gibbs, who he's just doing a book with, and I have a picture of me with that. It's so weird.
That's amazing.
It's so crazy. And, one other thing, again, back to that original question, when I graduated college, which is 75, there were so many things you could aspire to do. Bands that were looking for musicians, Stan Getz, Jerry Mulligan, Basie Band, Buddy Rich, Woody Herman, blah, blah, blah. It was like 20 or 30 things that out of college you could, if you learned the music and somehow networked, could aspire to do. So it wasn't really thinking you made it. It was just trying to get to play with something that would bring you to another level, really musically. So that was, I was sort of lucky. Metheny was, of course, part of that. But when Metheny ended, then just became a New York-based musician and would float and get lucky to play with different groups. So it was all, to me, it was actually from my mom, who kept, whenever I'd have a down in the dumps moment, she'd say, do you think you've taken this as far as you could go? And I always, into this day, would say, I'm just getting started. It really feels like that. You're just, and I think, every great musician I've ever admired kind of says the same thing. It's just it's just a learning curve. And that's how I just approached it. And
yeah, I love the way your perspective is, because honestly, when we first got to really know each other, I mean, it's been over a decade now, but you had mentioned just the fact of being open to people and being a person of kindness that can recognize another good human being, and you recognize the talent. And I love the story because Nick Antanasio, my teacher, no one ever really talked about this, but he didn't study under Moeller, but he was underneath one of Moeller's drum corps in New York. And this would have been in the pre-World War II. So I'm talking late 30s. and he was not a Moeller guy. He was the anti-Moeller guy. And so when I start to look back on these connections, I can see where I start to learn that he obviously did not like the Moeller style, but obviously as I played with these other folks like Bobby Redigan or Les Parks, Eric Perilou, I would see how their hands would move. And I went, you know what, there's a lot to be learned about just being around other styles and other types of musicians that you can just start putting in your toolbox. And all of a sudden, the world's your oyster, because then there's never enough that's going to fill it. You just keep filling your cup and you keep filling your cup. And that's where, I mean, I love watching you all play. I love how you interact with the crowd. And it's like, yes, your musicianship is phenomenal, but your showmanship and your ability just to connect with human beings on a musical and personal level, I mean, you are both world class at all of that stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks. Just as you're talking, I'm just thinking, that's another chapter in our life, the fact that we got married and had our worlds, and then all of a sudden we get this gig opportunity to play in Gary Sinise's band, which came out of Disney, really, because
of Disney. Yeah,
he was
the Candlelight Christmas show, which is this giant show in front of the American Adventure, 500-piece choir, 65-piece orchestra, Voices of Liberty, massive fanfare trumpets, and a guest celebrity narrator, and from like Walter Cronkite to Felicia Rashad to you name it, famous people. And so Gary Sinise was doing it, and he did it in 2001 and 2, and we kind of waved behind stage. We didn't know him. And I think we met him for the first time, maybe in 2002.
Yeah.
And then in 2003, we met him finally backstage, and Danny and I were on both sides of the stage, and we would kind of, look at each other. And
so he kind of knew things. There was a connection with us.
He asked, he goes, "Are you guys married?" Because he would watch us, because up there between, he would narrate and then we'd play a song. And then he asked Danny.
Of course, well, then one day he came over and said, "Didn't you used to play with Pat Metheny?" And I said, "How do you even know who that is?" Yeah. And he said, "Well, I actually play the bass, and I played bass first before I was an actor. And I saw you guys in LA at the Roxy in 81 or something like." And he said, "And I actually became friends with Pat and Lyle casually, and I used their music in a play that I directed where I insisted that these songs had to be played at this point in the play." And I guess Lyle and Pat did go to see it, so they were friends. But he knew me from that. And then shortly thereafter, a gig came up in Orlando, and his management called and basically said, "Would you guys like to play? The drummer in Chicago can't do it." And it was a life-changing.
And that was in 04.
Yeah, it was in 04. And I thought, I don't know how I don't know what we thought it was going to be, but I didn't think it was going to be, okay, it's Gary Sinise, Lieutenant Dan band. It was life-changing and one of the hardest gigs, because he was doing 2.5-hour shows, 50 tunes, and they were all charted out. Some of them, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, I knew, or cover tunes that you knew, but there was also a lot of more modern songs that had weird 2 bars here, and the drums drop out over here, and he didn't want us to use charts. So I remember being on the side of the Christmas show for like 2 or 3 weeks, every minute on a break with headphones, trying to memorize this stuff. It was so hard, but also it was a benefit for wounded soldiers, and Gary gave us a lecture and said, "You're going to see people in such bad shape with no faces and everything, missing limbs. Go talk to them." And you brought your friend Sharon, and sat with a guy that had lost both legs and just had replacements, had prosthetics. Before the end of this night, Sharon had him up on stage with a tambourine. It was this amazing, holy moly! It was something else to see the power of just playing music for people could be. And then it ended up being 16 years later. We're 17. We're in this band, and it's
the most important thing we've ever done. Over everything, because of giving back. And I remember the first couple years, it was like maybe 05, we were backstage, and this little girl came up to Gary and said, "Lieutenant Dan, can you fix my daddy's legs like yours?" And
he just gave her a hug.
Yeah,
and said, they're going to try to do the best they can.
And it's a funny story with him, because he was a bass player, and he was kind of a hoodlum in high school, and turns out they was outside smoking with a bunch of his bandmates, and the drama teacher walked by and said, hey, we're doing West Side Story. You guys want to audition for the gang? And they did, and he became like an actor, and she kind of discovered him. Well, she's still alive and lives in Nashville. And, you know, can you imagine? I'm the first one that got Gary Sinise.
There was something
Oh.
he went to dinner with her.
Yeah.
We were playing here, and then
For his book.
we somehow it was his book tour.
Yeah, he has a great book out called
Yeah,
Grateful
yeah.
American:
It was
Journey
something.
from Self to Service.
Yeah.
And it's a great book.
So-
But it's the shows like when we play at the Walter Reed and you know the hospitals. When so many Americans need to see that and see the sacrifices like all you guys make, because his father was in World War II. He was always shot. My grandfather was in World War II under MacArthur. Has a Legionnaire's Medal. My dad was a spy in the Korean War, and so we'll tell him about your dad.
Yeah, well, my dad was in the infantry, World War II, and was shot and survived. And it's still, would never ever talk about the war, other than I don't want to talk about it, but I just hope you never ever have to go through something like this.
He was missing for a year.
Yeah, my mom, they weren't even married yet, but got a message that he's been wounded and no further information. And he was moving from hospital to hospital. They really couldn't locate him, and they finally they did. And I just think, he was shot in the foot. The difference of me being here or not is, like 5 feet, where the bullet went. But it's turned, I know, your parents and I know my dad would have been proud of what we're doing. It's really changed our whole perspective about playing music. And there's also a musical thing too. I mean, I was just thinking about this, thinking back to the old Metheny days. We used to do this song American Garage, which was the second album. It was like a rock song. And we used to think that it was like, in a way, The Who. It was our version of jazz guys playing The Who, at that time. But there was something about the Metheny Group that, because the music was so eclectic and all over the place and was a combination of electric music and jazz music, it made me feel that I could call upon influences from all different genres into that music. And Gary's band, people sometimes don't understand what the music is, but there's so much music played in that band. It's really a learning curve of so many styles. And, having percussion and drums, it gives us a chance. I mean, we're taking every song seriously. When we play a country tune, we've got to sound as good as that band that played it. When we play Devil Went Down to Georgia, it's not just some goofy thing. I'm trying to lock the groove in. Beth is playing along with me. We're really trying to make it feel good. So there's a whole seriousness of focus of the music, even though we're doing good. And we've got Tom Bones Malone in the band now, who was in the Blues Brothers. Was he in the band when we played there?
Yeah, I think he may have been brand new.
Brand new, okay.
I think, yeah.
And the thing about his involvement was his parents were in Pearl Harbor when it was attacked in 1941. They had just gotten married and survived.
They were in a boat.
Yeah, they were in a boat, and they had to go into the harbor as the things are coming down. And we played the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor.
Oh my gosh, we were on an airplane with some of the survivors who had never been back.
They flew as many people that they could find, and we got to fly on the plane with them.
And Gary was serving them lunch.
It was something.
I mean, there was one guy that said, "Look at I have no fingerprints. I was on the Arizona. I got blown into the water. I was all burned. I've never been back." And they were
so
crying.
Humbling.
Oh.
But here, Tom got to go. He was born in Hawaii, I think, and got to go back, and so he was part of the band from that point on. But just some incredible experiences. So there's a whole philanthropic, it's a musical thing. The fact we can do it as a couple, we can play really good music and grow. So now when we play in other bands, we sound really good. We've been playing for 16 years together.
Well,
so
and one time we went to Afghanistan in 2009. We went to Afghanistan over Thanksgiving. And that was insane. We had to wear the flak jackets, and the plane went straight up and straight down.
Basic maneuvers.
Kevin from Hot Sticks gave us 900 pairs of sticks to give to the soldiers up there.
Wow.
And one day we were going to go take a bunch to the hospital, and the guy said no. A bunch of casualties.
I met a drummer who was a medic, and he said, "Let me take you to the hospital." And then he said, "It was a bad day."
Yeah.
So it was very dangerous when we were there. We didn't know.
Yeah.
So in fact, I was out running one day with our sound guy, and the Taliban started shooting at the base, and we dove into a bunker.
They would just lob stuff. It didn't hit anywhere near where we were, but it was. I mean, I can't even believe we did that.
Yeah.
But passing out the drumsticks, because we would just go on lines of people waiting to go into the concert and just walk. We're the drummers here, and a couple of them were just so touched by Gary's piece and
I love it. And I remember my first tour with the Old Guard going down. We did San Antonio and we did the BAMC, so like the Burn Center down in San Antonio. And our commander walked up and she said, just letting you know, we've been asked to go down and have lunch with some of the severe cases. And she says, I don't know what you're going to see. And honestly, that was one of those moments where I said, I have to do this. If I'm the one who's lucky enough to get paid to play drums and serve my country, I owe at least at minimum this. And that was my first year in the Corps. And I remember you see these incredible things and you're going, these folks can't live a normal day in their life after this. And you're going, you know what? It's almost my duty and responsibility to give them some sense of normalcy, some sense of appreciation. And the fact that you guys share that is it's incredible. And I love that.
Our first concert at BAMC, when we were just, forming in like 05, 04, we played kind of in the lobby, and at the end we play God Bless the USA, and Gary says, if you can stand up, do it. This guy had no legs or arms, and the nurses held up his body, and I just lost it. And Jeff, our singer, lost it. He couldn't sing because here's a guy, basically a stump, and he's singing as loud as he could, and I got goosebumps. I'm thinking, we have no problems when you see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember at that gig, there was a gentleman in a coat and tie, but was severely burned, was attending our concert. And I remember Gary saying, go up and talk. So I said, I'm going to go talk to this guy. And I went, and was the sweetest guy. He said, look, I went through a lot of stuff, but I'm here I'm kind of volunteering to help other people get through it. And he had his son with him. And
he had no ears, no nose.
It set a whole tone for what this band, is in our life. So it's really,
yeah. So what's a day like that? I mean, typically you guys do a tour, and I'm sure there's multiple day tours, but I mean, you visit hospitals. I know you've done stuff with Chef Robert Irvine, and there's kind of like a program. So like, what would a day like that kind of look like?
Well, American has been chartering us or flying us a lot, which has been great. So they'll either charter or we'll take a flight, and then we'll get there, and we have a crew of like 5 guys that will set us up, but then we'll finish. And then basically the band lives all over Chicago, some here, some LA, some New York, and we come together and we rehearse basically there. So we may have a 4 or 5 hour sound check and then have a couple hours off and then do a 3-hour show. Right. So, and then, get on a plane and go somewhere else. And a lot of times it's a 2 or 3 day weekend. But again, since the whole pandemic, we haven't been out in a year.
Yeah.
So it's very sad.
But, some things coming. I mean, when American supplies a charter plane, it's a very early day, usually a 6 a.m. departure. So you've got to get there 5.
And get up at 3 a.m.
And the plane drops us off, and then American puts it back in service. And then it comes back and picks us up, takes us to the next thing, and then it goes back to service. So it'll fly like a regular plane after they drop us off.
And Gary is like an actor. Well, he is an actor. When we rehearse, I mean, he is. You just you go. Yeah. But we know the cause.
That's the way you said it.
Yeah.
Yep. But it's it's.
And Gary's fun on Danny. He'll turn around and go, "Don't rush."
Well, no, his time is good. Yeah. See, that's the other thing is if you play with. If the rhythm section isn't happening, it would not be so much fun. Gary surprisingly has good time, plays in tune, and has great ears. I mean, even when he does the Christmas show at narrating Candlelight, the oboe player missed the entrance. It's like, what? Or I'll go like, ding, 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 on the he'll look at me like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So he is a really just a talent for, he's an actor, great actor, but as far as he's just a multi-talented person who has a knack for that. He doesn't play outside his comfort zone, but he'll play some little slappy things on the bass, and he sounds fit. I can't wait to play with him.
When you met him, he's such a wonderful, down-to-earth guy. He thanked you.
Yeah,
remember?
Yeah. Well, he was so
I
happy.
You guys have opened so many great doors, and that was an amazing moment there because it was one of those things. He looked at me and he goes, "I know I've met you before."
Yeah.
I was like, "All right, cool."
Yeah.
But I mean, that we got to bring the old guard guys to sit down and watch rehearsal at Constitution Hall when you're doing the Christmas concerts, and then Walter Reed and all those things. But yeah, I mean, his memory is incredible, and I was always shocked because he'll pull something out during the show, and it's like he's a great musician.
Yeah, he can. He really is surprising. I can't wait. It's so much fun. As a rhythm section, you want to play with your bass player buddy, and I can't wait till we get back to playing.
I always say that he's the cake, I'm the icing.
Yeah.
Gary's in the middle of it. Yeah. So it works well. I can,
And I love it. Like one, because Beth, in her percussion set, which you saw, there's a lot of drum set elements in there. So it's kind of like the power snare drums playing in unison when I'm not, messing around and playing some weird thing.
Yeah, jazz drummer. I remember we just take some lessons from Joe Morello, and he'd be like, Gottlieb is supposed to be in unison.
Yeah. Because when we would try to play these duets, like Just Two or things like that, I'm like all over them. So we would open it up to improvise for me. So
that's awesome.
But you asked a question about the hospital things. Gary, I mean, very smart the way their foundation has organized themselves. They've broken the whole thing into programs. So the hospital concerts fall into one category, and they're funded a certain way. So it's called Invincible Spirit. Is that what it is?
Yeah, Invincible Spirit Days. And they bring games for the kids.
Yeah, there's food. A car show, and Chef Irvine comes in, and he does a thing. And he gets the staff of the hospital to come and cook with him. So he's got a whole other thing that he's doing. And so that's one program. Then the band is another program. Then there's another program to fly World War II vets to the museum in New Orleans. We got to go on that one time.
That was awesome.
Where he documents their stories on video for the archives and gets them to go and kind of relive, those that want to, relive those experiences and bond together. And now they've introduced the thing where they have a high school, this is again pre-pandemic, but a high school group accompanies the vets. So the World War II vets go, and each vet gets one high school student. To go and spend the weekend and document their story.
Because they need to learn about the greatest generation.
It's really, and then there's another program for firefighters where every once in a while I'll open up the internet and it'll say volunteer fire department in Des Moines gets Gary Sinise donate. It's like, what?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, we do a lot of those honor flights, and we talk to folks that have come in. And what's amazing is the amount of folks who come and they feel like they've finally done their last bit of meeting with everyone, and they see their monument, and they decide at that point it's their time to go, and they pass on. And I think it's one of those really powerful moments where there's folks that have just done so much in their lives for our country, and I like being a small little part of it is so fascinating. And I really relate to what you said earlier about this. If it was, if that bullet was 5 feet different, we'd be a very different world right now. My wife's uncle Rolly was a Flying Tigers mechanic, and so they were coming in southern Italy, and they were coming across, and he got separated from his unit, and he wasn't telling anyone any of these stories, but he knew I was in the Army. So he just opened up and started sharing all these crazy stories. And my grandfather was an Army Ranger in World War II. And I told him that he was an Army Ranger. Uncle Rolly, who was 92 years old at the time, just starts crying, and he grabs my arm and he says, "You're a real man. Your grandfather was a Ranger." And I found out the reason why he acted that way is that he was separated from his unit. The Germans had surrounded them. He hid under a bridge for 2 days and was just thinking he was going to die. And a little squad of Rangers ended up finding him and saved his life. And he never really shared that story. And so Uncle Rolly he always grabs me, and he's like this, sweet old Italian guy. And he's telling me these war stories. And then my mother-in-law goes, he's never told anybody that story. And so you see when these connections come out, and what we can do for those vets. I mean, music's the key, and we open up that door, and these amazing stories come out. So I'm glad that the high schoolers are being exposed to that, to try to capture those stories, because if we don't remember our history, we don't have a future.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I love it. So I have a couple questions on the Gary Sinise side of the house. So COVID is figuring itself out. Are you guys going back on the road? Is that the game plan?
Well, we have a concert in Nellis in Vegas on the 5th, and then we're filming in that. And then hopefully next year we will get going again,
Okay.
especially the whole military being vaccinated, and hopefully that'll go, because it's just because our concerts are big, as you know, and he just doesn't want to expose anybody to any problems.
Yeah, and I think that's a smart move. I mean, the same thing. I know there's a lot of USO involvement, and the USO is really trying to make sure that people are being taken care of properly. And I think Honor Flight even just put out a thing recently that they're starting to kind of organize how they're going to do their events. And there have been a few, but I think, full scale, I think we're looking probably next summer. It seems like is the most.
Yeah, it's got to stabilize a little
Right.
more before
Right.
any of it can really get going. It seems
Right.
like.
And it's sad, but that's reality. It's the way, the way it is.
Yeah. So I got a couple more questions, and we'll wrap it up with a final four at the end. But so, I mean, you guys do a lot of giving back, and teaching is one of those things. What can you just share some words of wisdom? Like, why do you feel it's important to continue to give back from an educational point of view?
Well, I think everybody on the planet should play a musical instrument. I mean, just the joy when we do kids' concerts of a kindergartner just laughing and having fun with music. It's kind of like playing Little League. It's just learn an instrument, or something in the arts, whether it's music, art, drama, something, because it makes us human, definitely. And I just think that there's something to be said about learning an instrument and enjoying in that, and also everything it teaches you for life. I'm not saying be a music major. No, that's a different thing. I think only a certain 0.01% should do that.
Sure.
But I think everybody should play an instrument, because especially like marching band and choir and orchestra, just because it teaches you to be a team player, and it teaches you to work hard.
Yeah.
So that's the main thing.
And for me, I just feel I was really lucky in the people that I got to study with, especially Joe Morello, and then to hang out with Mel Lewis, and to play in Airto's band and spend time with Harold Jones. And he studied with Ed Soph and studied with Bob Moses. And, you kind of throw all of this together. And I feel, especially with newer generations, those that are serious drummers that really want to get that type of information, a lot of the things that I talk about, they don't even know. I mean, I have a student who didn't even know who Airto, the great percussionist, was. And, I sent 10 videos the other day, and it was, oh, are you kidding me? So it's kind of nice just to open up, just to throw things out there. I feel like I'm more of a coach. The same thing that I've gotten. And I feel like I'm still kind of studying, and also the students bring in things that I never heard of, and it's a chance. Did you hear this drummer? No. And then, whoa, I didn't even know that existed. Yeah. But I mean, later in life for me, I've been kind of wanting to continue writing these books, because it's something, I'm really writing them for the students, but I'm discovering it myself as I go. I mean, to listen to Mel Lewis measure by measure on Transcribe, I didn't know he played all this stuff, or Harold Jones, that he did all. It's wonderful to dissect it apart, and I'm just it's a learning to pass it on. So that's kind of my motivation with that.
I love it. I love it. So if you had words of wisdom or advice for aspiring musicians during COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID, however it is, what would be some advice you would share for an aspiring musician?
Well, I would use the time well and enjoy it and take it very seriously. That would be, what I do is, school is a weird thing to me now, because a lot of times when you're in like college level, you have so many things that aren't drum related. If you're a drum set major, that take up so much time. And a lot of times your work has to happen in the summer, but I would try to make a systematic approach to what the end goal is, and kind of map it out. I got to learn songs. I got to learn styles. I got to learn. I got to get my time good. I got to listen to the masters. I got to, work on my technique. And I would find the source for all of that, and kind of map it out, and also just keep an open mind to try to enjoy it along the way. The other thing is, I know there can be discouraging moments where things go up and down, but just to know that everybody goes through it. Keep an open mind and approach it as positively as you can.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. All right, so final 4 questions here. So number 1, could you share any of your favorite musical memories? We know we talked about a lot of them. What are some that stick out?
Oh, favorite musical memories. Okay. Well, a lot. I think, uh, I kind of have the before Gary and after Gary thoughts. I always loved playing in the Pat Metheny Group. That was great. I loved playing everything pretty much. We got to play with Michael Franks. That was great. I got to play with John McLaughlin. That was great. I got to play in Gil Evans. That was great. So all of those different things, and then the whole Gary band with Beth. Um, playing for the kids at Disney that are the Gold Star kids, and it started a little earlier, even before that. I'd have to say is probably right up there. Just I was expecting older kids, and a lot of them are younger, and you know what they've been through, and it touches you, and you feel like you see them come up on stage. Nothing like it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Special. How about for you?
Mine, being a percussionist and having so many different parts of my life, from going drum corps, standing on finals night, there's
Yeah.
nothing like that goosebumps, to being being an Alabama marching band when Bear Bryant, we win the national championship, and playing Yay Alabama, to Disney and all that cool stuff and goosebumps. But I'd have to say the most moving was playing in front of the Capitol with Gary. When we did the Memorial Day special.
That was a great one.
That, and Colin Powell was watching us on the side of the stage. And I was like, what? And
live TV, we had to shorten. We got like 6 minutes and 60 seconds that we had to fit 4 songs in. So we had to edit them, and it was hard to remember that we're not doing the bridge on, whatever the songs were.
But I have to say
that,
my dad being a vet, the first time he saw us play with Gary, I just saw him crying, and it was really funny because it was it's a Navy base, and he was an Army guy. And I met the guy doing security. I said, "Hey, my dad's coming in. Can you give him a hard time?" And they're like, so he came in, and "You can't park here, sir. You're in the Army." And my dad's like, "What?" And he goes, "You're just kidding, right?" And then they put him right in front, and, they gave him a Navy hat, and he put it on. And, that's just knowing what my dad was the most patriotic guy, and knowing what it meant for for us to be doing this.
Yeah.
And I still think he's looking up down from heaven, saying, I'm proud of that. So, of all the great shows and stuff, the ego of I played with this and this and this, none of that matters. It's about, playing for those wounded people and giving back.
I love it. Excellent. All right, next question. So, books, musical, non-musical, what are some favorite books?
Oh,
I'm a huge book person. I usually read 2 or 3 a week, and
Nice.
I'm a runner, and I run to books. And so I'm a huge World War II buff, and I've read just about everything. And the one I'm listening to now is probably one of my favorites of all time, called Beneath a Scarlet Sky. In fact, I had to look up the exact title, about a true story about Pino Lella, an Italian 17-year-old who helped Jews escape Italy. And he was a spy for a general who was the head of the Italian Nazis. And it's a fabulous book. I'm not finished with it yet. I'm almost finished, but you just get sucked in because it's a true story. Yeah. So I've read. Danny doesn't also tell you that his mother worked with Holocaust survivors. She passed recently at 98, but she worked in New York City for 50 years, helping Holocaust victims. This ring I'm wearing was partially from a death camp that escaped, that his mom's friend, Mrs. Geis, helped put this together.
Yeah.
And so, and she wouldn't talk about it. So so there's another whole history there. So I just love that genre, and we need to pass that on, and people need to know what happened then, so it never happens again.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to think. The bunch of the books that you've had me run with.
I always say, Danny, read this.
They're
read this.
mostly like Danielle Steele novels and things like that, which are fun. But I like just reading books about artists, about musicians and things like that. I'm trying to remember. It just escapes me right now what some of the ones are, but I love reading biographies, and I read Levon Helm's book, which I really love, talking about the band, and just to see what different people's perspectives are, which are really, really great. Thinking back about my mom again for a second, I mean, that was something, again, her perspective was, if you've gone through something so horrific, whenever you feel like you're going to lose hope, it's like, how do you think back to what those people must have felt like when the war was over? How do you ever go on?
Yeah.
And her thing was, you just have to find a way to keep going. And I think in her honor, as Beth mentioned, she just passed away recently, but she did work with, she was a volunteer during World War II, and that became an organization that she worked in for, close to 50 years.
And we found papers of hers that had families, family Auschwitz, deceased,
that was
murdered.
She had to go
Oh my
look
gosh.
for her family and other families. That was her job, and as mind blowing as it was, that nobody knew what was really going on. And when they discovered, it was just so awful.
Wow.
But my mom always said that she did well with what she had to work with, and that's always been a good inspiration to me. So we all should do well with what we've got to work
yes.
with.
I'm sure that's a loaded statement from certain sides. Well, that's fantastic. So, hobbies. Obviously, you're a big runner, but I mean, I think we got to look at this room that you're in real quick. I mean, obviously, music making is definitely a hobby.
Okay, so can you see? Let's see. The camera. How do you turn this so it's on?
It's looking at you, so just kind of turn it around.
Oh, it's looking at me. Okay, yeah, here we go.
Toys, percussion toys, marimbas, doombecks, drum sets, cymbals everywhere.
Timpani.
Yeah, I'll get to that.
Vibes.
Yeah, there's the xylophone, there's the vibes, there's the 5-octave, there's the 5 timpani, there's 2 more marimbas. Yeah, there's up there on this top. There's Danny's.
We got a djembe. We got
Nice.
20 djembes.
Yeah. We do a lot of drum circles, like with Victor Wooten at his camp. So over here, there's pictures of the band, pictures all over. This is a.
And your little set that you use.
Yeah, it's cute. Whatever. If you can see it all. Yeah, it's cool because it's all organized, so it's all in one spot.
That is amazing. I love it.
But our biggest hobby is we're like obsessed with tennis, so we play every day.
We have become tennis freaks. I mean, never till we moved here to Nashville.
I think we started in 2014. But yeah.
Really?
And Beth is in like a million leagues and competitions, and I'm just trying to hit the ball. But whatever.
Yeah.
So, favorite tennis players?
Serena and Venus, right?
Well, Roger Federer.
Yeah,
he's
So my buddy Eric Juilliard from Basel, Switzerland would be very happy because Roger Federer is from Basel. He's not a drummer though.
Yeah.
There is some, I don't know if any of the listener or the people listening or watching this, there's some connection with music and tennis and drumming, holding a stick, holding a racket, and the improvisational factor. It's really a very improvisational, follow the ball, like following a soloist.
Well, remember the inner game of tennis we used to use in music?
Yep.
And there's like the 4 tennis strokes. And it's funny because I was in a match a couple weeks ago and I made it to a tiebreaker. And the first thing I said was, don't double fault. I double faulted. And just like that book says, remember as a percussionist, okay, don't do it. Don't miss the note. Boom.
Yep.
So
it happens. It's all inside. Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. So last question, if folks want to find out more about you and the things that you're doing, where can they go to do that?
We're on Facebook. Probably the easiest thing.
And there's a band website, and I get messages through that sometimes, through lieutenantdanband.org or through GarySineseFoundation.org, and then the band is in that website.
Yeah, the foundation has some great videos of what they're doing, and that's fabulous.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you both for an incredible story. You guys are beyond inspiring, and I think people are going to get a lot of value from this interview.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for you. Yes, for you.
You are inspiring.
Yes.
Thanks for all you have done and are doing. So.
And we got to play Crazy Army again.
Absolutely. It is definitely on there. Thanks, folks.
All
right.
Mark,
take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Greetings again, everyone. We just wanted to take a second to say thank you to Seif Studios for their creative media. If you want to find out more about Seif Studios, look them up on www.seifstudios.com. We'd also like to say thank you to our educational partner, ProLogic's Percussion, American-made drum pads. they're doing a special discount code for our listeners today. So if you go to www.prologixpercussion.com and type in TWT20, you will receive 20% off your entire order. So thank you very much for tuning in today, and please check out our supporters.